Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, breaking down a bunch of Raptors news, and Gary Trent Jr. being Defensive Player of the Year, Scottie Barnes back on top of the rookie ladder, OG Anunoby injured, and also Shaquille O'Neal, NBA legend, fumbling OG's name. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about in this news update video, but Riker, the first thing that we gotta dive into is Gary Trent Jr., Defensive Player of the Year potential, because currently he is placed third. He is currently third in the NBA's rookie ladder, and I'll throw that on the screen. I'm trying to get used to all the animations here, but he's ranked here, and the article sort of explains that he guards the number one option on the other team every night. You know, he's a leader in steals. He gets a bunch of stuff rocking. Riker, what are your thoughts on Gary Trent Jr. being
You're
this high
so ready to
defensive
attack
player?
this pick that you're confusing his name with OG. You're ready to go straight into OG's the better defensive player. But these awards typically tend to go towards the best stat line. And when you have the most steals as a raw number in the league, third most or fourth most in the NBA in steals per game, he is top of the league in all of the weird stats that I don't know who's actually on the sideline counting up, but things like loose balls grabbed and deflections in the league. Him and Fred VanVleet are 1 and 2 in deflections in the league. So it makes sense. Usual suspects ahead of him, and Draymond Green, Miles Turner, who at one point last year was top 3 with Gobert, and Chris Boucher in blocks per game. But I digress. It's cool to see Gary Trent Jr. Ben, go at it. You want to make the point that OG needs to be in that list.
OG does need to be in that list. I don't think I added the music up there, scene. We got some background music here, but Riker, I love the love for Gary Trent Jr. I love the fact that people are seeing our star boy and saying, okay, let's give him credit for clamping down, getting these deflections, as you said, being a mobile defender, right? But OG Anunoby is getting the number one guard every night. And I find it...
Listen, you could even say Scottie Barnes is getting the number one guard if he's having to guard RJ Barrett and Julius Randle against the Knicks, or even Jason Tatum on the Celtics.
Like, those two guys are usually getting a higher tier of guard compared to Gary Trent Jr., especially the bigger guys in the league. And then a lot of people watching the Raptors games, now I obviously don't have any stats on Nick Nurse drawn up who's guarding what option, that we don't have any specific numbers, but from the eye test, I feel like even from the smaller guards, Fred VanVleet gets more of the number one option on the other team than a Gary Trent Jr. So this is surprising. We've obviously raved about Gary Trent Jr.'s defense. I do think he probably deserves to be there over a Barnes or a Fred VanVleet, but having him up there over an OG Anunoby is something I would just call foolish, something I would call silly.
But it's not foolish, because if you're not watching the games and you look at who's the player on the team that has not only the most steals per game, but also the most steals per game in the NBA, of course you're going to tend to go with that player. We know for a fact people aren't watching the Raptors games when they have 2 nationally televised games this entire season, Ben. So we'll move on from the next one. I think it's fine. You think it's OG.
Riker, the fact that he is there, because I didn't want to get into too much Gary Trent slander. Is there any chance that with the steals per game going up, and I did make my take, I think OG should be there over Gary Trent Jr. I'm surprised OG hasn't made an all NBA defensive team already in his career, but I've made that known on this podcast. But with Gary Trent behind Draymond Green, I forget the person he's above, also Miles Turner. Do you think there's a chance he eclipses those guys and gets Defensive Player of the Year?
Nope. Because Draymond Green is first because of how good in every category the net defense is as a team for the Golden State Warriors. Then he also happens to be the best defensive player on that team. So when the Raptors are struggling to even hit 500 and they're not at the top of the league in terms of the team defensive ratings, it's always going to sway towards Draymond Green's favor.
Yeah. No, so that's I tend to agree with that, but it would be cool to see Gary Trent Jr., a guy that we had questions about on the defensive end coming into the season, end up winning Defensive Player of the Year.
Who had questions?
Well, we thought you need to get minutes. You have to be engaged, active on the defensive end, and we said
that wasn't a question for me. I said we made this trade because he's a better defender than Norman Powell. He's worse offensively from what he'd shown to this point in his career. Now, obviously, he started the season pretty well. His three-point shooting's not amazing, but he's scoring from different spots in the court. But What are you saying? We weren't ever questioning his defense.
Well, I had a few questions for his defense, but yeah, I forgot to show his stats, but 16 points per game for Gary Trent Jr. You brought up the 3-point percentage, 35, which isn't that crazy for a guy that's at your 2. It's definitely not the 45 we traded normal way for, but 2.5 steals is what's going to make the defensive player of the year money for Gary Trent Jr. But Riker, let's dive into another guy that's not third. He is first, back on top of the rookie ladder. Scottie Barnes has eclipsed Evan Mobley once again and is currently leading the way for the rookies out there. And I'm showing the stats, breaking out these new animations. He's averaging 16 points per game, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal for himself, shooting 50% from the field, couple turnovers, which is tough, and only 18% from the 3-point line. But outside the 3-point shooting, which we know he didn't have in the first place, right? His defense has been elite. He has been an impact player, which is rare for rookies coming into the games. I know he's a little bit off in the last couple, but he deserves to be atop of this rookie ladder right now, Riker.
Yep, and I'm looking at Mobley's. He's 15, 8, and 2.5. So they're kind of mirroring each other's. I'm surprised that he took him over. Are you? Because the Cavaliers have been more successful as a team. Both of them are integral pieces of their respective starting lineups. Are you surprised? Typically, it goes to the guy who has the better team success.
I'm not surprised because Evan Mobley, and this is some news as well, he's going down with injury for 2 to 4 weeks, so maybe they are projecting that or looking at that somehow. But if you look at the stats, Scottie Barnes averages a few more points, more rebounds, and I do think he's the more impactful player. I don't think there's a way to, look at what Evan Mobley does, even though on the defensive end he's been solid as well, right? There's a lot of guys playing well in Cleveland, and they do have the better record, but I think the stats and just Scottie Barnes arguably being the best player on the Raptors certain nights gives him the edge, right? Multi-time.
And here's the other difference,
13
too.
13 times Scottie Barnes award winner, right?
13 times. And he's showing up more in the highlight reel. That's why he's getting so much attention, because he's doing things that's, getting clips, getting on that hoop mixtape. And the other thing is, too, he's beating Mobley in every stat category except blocks per game, but it makes sense because Mobley's the secondary defender, so he's able to slide in and challenge shots at the rim, whereas Scottie Barnes is the primary defender on, as we already said earlier this pod, the best players typically at that 3 position. So it's been a really interesting year, and he's playing so well on both ends. I think it'd be slanderous if he doesn't get Rookie of the Year, but we'll see how it plays out.
Definitely deserves it. At this point, obviously has to keep it up, but even if he doesn't get Rookie of the Year, he's usually leading the way for the Scottie Barnes Award, so that's something he can always count on. But Riker, the big one, the most impactful one for the Raptors probably is OG Anunoby injured. That's some news that has come out from Doug Smith, where he came out and said OG banged his hip at Raptors practice and is questionable for tomorrow's game in Salt Lake City. Boucher and Achua are also questionable. Watanabe is also closer, but is still out versus the Jazz. So obviously we've dealt with some injuries over the course of this year. OG's been our number 1 option, had that electrifying first half against the Portland Trailblazers, waned off a little bit as the game went along, but we need some wins right now, Riker. How does this impact the Toronto Raptors? Definitely makes me say OGs.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but Utah's the team you don't want to have a bunch of your bigs out against, particularly when they have the big Frenchman and Gobert, who we also brought up earlier in this podcast, standing right in the middle of the lane. We know Achua struggles against the bigger guys anyways. Now we have no one backing up Birch at that 5 spot. Pascal Siakam still struggling. Haven't got a win with him in the roster yet this season. And OG, our primary defender, like you said, who probably play for many possessions against Donovan Mitchell. So this is going to be a real tough game to win with those guys in particular out.
Yeah. See, this West Coast road trip will be very telling at the level of play for this Toronto Raptors team. They don't have to win all the games. They don't have to go 5-0 for us to say, okay, they're a legit, I don't want to say contender, but going to exceed expectations, go into the Ben Rodgers expectations of top 4 seed, but they got to at least get a couple. And I feel like a game against Utah, right? It was the last time they played in Utah, they had a 3-month break after. They had that crazy game where Gobert and OG almost got into a fight, right? There was that whole moment. That was one of the exciting games of the pre-bubble. But yeah, they got to get some W's, and without OG Anunoby, maybe Scotty Barnes, people go back to natural positions. It'd be nice to have Precious Achiuwa back, so we have our two big lineup with Gobert still there, Hassan Whiteside there for Utah. We need this. How important is this game for the Toronto Raptors, Riker? Because I feel like it's significant to get a couple on this road trip.
Big picture, Utah is not the game that I'm going to judge the Raptors' ability to turn this into a playoff year or a tanking year. I think regardless of the outcome, this one, I wouldn't read too much into it because Utah has much higher expectations than the Raptors, and they're a good regular season team. And if the Raptors have injuries, I wouldn't expect much from the squad in this one.
That's fair. And finally, to end off this podcast, Shaquille O'Neal fumbling OG Anunoby's name, right? Shaq didn't fool. Hopefully we don't get hit with copyright. We're trying to up the production value here.
Number 3, OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby. Never turn your...
Like, what is that pronunciation, Riker? That is a tough look for Shaquille O'Neal throwing up that OG.
Am I throwing up an L or is this reversed? Which way is the screen picking up my...
I think that's the one.
This would be an L?
Yeah.
Is Shaq taking an L not knowing the name of one of our starters on a championship team? Or did he fumble it like he kind of mispronounced it and just leaned into it, repeated it a second time because he knew it was a joke? How did you interpret him saying that? Because I almost felt like he knew it. His tongue slipped or something. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt here.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Riker, we might have to update the Charles Barkley meme because I don't think it was a mistake. Shaq, I don't know. It's tough. I think he realized it was bad and then leaned into it, but people just can't get OG's name right. We saw that referee. There was that viral clip of I think it was Jack Armstrong just flaming the referee for messing up Anunoby's name or whatever they had it as.
But here's the thing, you can understandably mess up Anunoby because it's a strange name. It doesn't. I guess it is just pronounced the same way that you would read it out. There's nothing weird about phonetically how you would say it, but it's a name you wouldn't see very often. However, OG is just 2 letters, and that's what Jack mispronounced first. So you don't have to hear it to know it. It's just 2 letters. You're just saying the letters of the alphabet.
I was waiting for I'm waiting for someone to mess up his name, saying Og Anunoby or something like that. Throwing out something like that there.
Og Anunubs.
That's tough. Well, anyways, you guys are the best for making this far. Let us know what you guys think of the new setup. We got a new news style of video. Also, giveaway happening at that's
We're
the
close.
right button. I don't know how close we are, but at 22k subs. At 22, the Raptors have been bad, so people don't subscribe to Raptors channels and the Raptors suck. But we are giving this hoodie away at 22k subscribers. So
21.6.
What?
We're not that far. 21.6. We're only 400 away.
I'm sure this video will get 100 views of people that aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you subscribe, next video you could potentially be walking home with that hoodie, or if you're at home, you could get it sent to you, mailed to you. Shout out Jake Clement Johnson winning the last giveaway. But join the channel membership. Check out the Instagram, the Twitter, the TikTok, all that cool stuff. Riker, do you have any last words on all this Raptors news?
That's it for me, Ben. Cheers.